Hello and welcome to the delicious recipe here on UPRN. If you want to watch along live and watch the video, you can check us out on UFO Paranormal Radio, and it is done twice, or UFO Gods and Extraterrestrials. We are also on Twitter, UPRN. We are also on Joe Montaldo's pages on Facebook, and on my page there too, the delicious recipe. And we're coming in here. This is part two, and I'm sorry about anything that happened there last week. I had to upload one there because I had family in town, and I uploaded a thing there, and I did a live concert with my brother and Big Jim's son. There, we played in doors there at the Alpaca Palooza. So it was a little bit of everything that went on there over the summertime. Gets a little bit messy there with time schedules and stuff like that, and you want to enjoy your days off. And like I said to people there before, I'm doing my butcher apprenticeship, so I get like a couple of days off, and I got them off during that time. So I just want to welcome back Big Jim. This is chocolate diamond cake part two, and we're going to Africa. And Big Jim, just go ahead and just explain everything here.
Well, the reason why I got my Bomber sweatshirt on here is, they're Hockey Canada's having a tough time there and selling tickets. And it's unfortunate what happened there with the hockey thing, because we're all big hockey fans. I know, Del, you're a huge hockey fan. I'm a huge hockey fan. And I was just talking to Don Cherry the other day, and I was telling him about my career with the Flin Flon Bombers. And it was pretty funny back in 1961. The main guys in our team were Tracy Pratt, Cal Purington, Bob Willie, and the Bombers needed players for a B team. I hadn't skated in 6 years, but they signed me anyways. And it was the first game I played against the Melville Millionaires. I started a big fight going, and at least I couldn't skate that great, but at least I could fight a bit. But anyways, we're going to do the show on my trip to my time in Africa there, looking for diamonds.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's just that the thing that's really funny is that this is going to be one thing that I remember in my history is that with you and Audrey is that when we went through small towns, we would go and look at grave sites or look at people and just talk to people and talk to legions and stuff like that about history of people that are there, because there are so many interesting stories that are there, and people don't understand about how they sort of impacted areas. And I really that's one thing that I get out of it anyways, is that I really love that. It was like, I love history. I love how and I see the dying of towns. Like I traveled through Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and stuff like that, and I'm going, well, these are big grain elevator towns and stuff like that, and going, what is the whole thing out of this? Like, why are these small little factions being destroyed? And you can see that from Thunder Bay, which is in northern Ontario, going towards Winnipeg, and you look at Ignis, Uppsala, whatever, the Atikokan, all that stuff there, the timber stuff, and even with mining there too as well. Hemlo, Marathon, Manitouwadge. Like my family grew up through this whole area. My grandfather was a civil engineer, a stationary engineer. He lived. They lived in Manitouwadge for a while and stuff like that. Yeah, it's just fine, like how these towns just sort of drowned out because of natural resources and stuff like that. And it's funny is that the part is that what you are doing and stuff like that is finding places to go and build them up. But then it works into the other part of the world market about, oh, well, do we want to really spend money in these places? And do we want to give you the money for finding what we found? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big game. It's a not even poker. It's just a game of rich people over what are we going to do?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go into the African diamonds.
Well, I've been surrounded by diamonds all my life. Sometimes I just didn't even know it. There was a guy in Flin Flon, that's way up in northern Manitoba, about 500 miles north of Winnipeg. He found 5 diamonds. I know where he found them because he told me in the 70s later on in my life. Uh, Anyways, he sent these diamonds off to De Beers to be identified. And he got a letter back saying that they weren't really interested and got the diamonds back. Apparently, his house burned down and the diamonds went, disappeared in the burn of the house. But interestingly enough, De Beers showed up in Canada under a very nondescript, mundane name the next year. And of course, they obviously had to be interested in where his diamonds came from. Guy by the
Mm-hmm.
name of John Julius Johnson.
Ooh, 3 J's.
And then later on in the 50s, my dad and I were drilling for iron ore in Saskatchewan. We used an oil rig to go down to 2,000 feet through all the sediments that lie above the Precambrian shield, and then we used a diamond drill to go down. The iron ore started at 2,000 feet, and we were still drilling in it at 4,100 feet. Well, you can convert that into meters, I guess.
Yeah.
But I'm still stuck in the feet and inches generation. But
Yeah.
anyways, what was interesting about that was we didn't know at the time that we were right in the middle of a big kimberlite field where with diamonds, the kimberlites had come up and they couldn't get to surface because there was an impervious layer there and they spread out like the big head of a mushroom. And
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't until sometime in the 80s that somebody twigged on to the fact that there could be diamonds there. That's in the Fort Alicorn Reserve area, big game reserve. They got elk and deer and a lot of animals down there, and it's just east of Prince Albert and west of another little town there. I'm trying to
Yep.
think of the name. But anyways, then in the 70s, believe it or not, I lived in a little place called Dobie outside of Kirkland Lake, and there were diamonds just north of us. In fact, Dobie was the town site for the Upper Canada mine, and there was a big kimberlite dike underground in the mine, and that should have
Wow.
twigged people right there that there is a possibility of diamonds, because
Mm.
wherever you find kimberlite, there's bound to be a chance for diamonds. And
Okay,
then in
because
the
let,
1980s,
let me just
uh,
hold you one part there because there's 2 stories that I want to go and pop in here.
okay,
There was there's a part that Randall Carlson, he's a guy, he's a professor there about the big huge flood that happened there that pushed things over. But then also I remember you telling me is that somebody around Kirkland Lake or maybe south of that or whatever like that found a huge boulder that was like full of gold. And they were thinking it was glacially pushed.
right,
So that was the part about is that okay, well now if you're finding diamonds here, where was the source?
right,
Because of the glacial part there in 12,000 years ago.
right.
Yeah. I
Well,
don't.
there's for a long time, they found diamonds years and years ago before Chuck 50 in 1991 found his big discovery in the Northwest Territories. There
Yeah.
was diamonds in the glacial debris down in the northern United States, and people kept, scientific people kept saying, well, they must have come from Canada, from somewhere in Ontario, because
Right.
they were found in Michigan, all those different northern
Right.
states, Wisconsin, Illinois. And so they were thinking, well, the glacier must have brought them down from someplace. And it turned out to be true. It just out of Attawapiskat there, that's where De Beers finally found the Victor pipe. And later they found a bunch of other pipes.
Wow, eh? And so it's really funny that you get those says so the guy finds a couple diamonds and the company that doesn't want the diamonds all of a sudden show up under a pseudo company and
Yeah,
sets up right?
Right.
It's it's just always find this stuff so interesting. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, we're not interested. Okay, set up another company,
Well,
right?
listen, Dell, the diamond business always has been very clandestine. And I mean, people didn't didn't want to give out secrets about. And same in hard rock mining and oil and everything else. There's people, you don't want to give people a hint of where you're working or where you've made a discovery until you've
Hmm.
got everything staked and covered. That's I've run into that dozens and dozens of times over my life. So in
Yeah.
the 70s, Johnny Johnson was working for us in Timmins. We were working for the Guggenheim family out in New York City. And he told me, he said, Jim, I'm not going back to Flin Flon, but I'll tell you where I found those 5 diamonds. And so I got the maps and checked it all out. And he pointed out where he'd found the diamonds. And later on, I found when he died out at our Pine Bay mine there in just out of Flin Flon at Sourdough Bay. I
Hmm.
found a bunch of old records on different prospectors, and there was a whole bunch of articles and maps from Johnny Johnson. I guess my dad had filed them away, and where he told me there was no doubt about it on the maps. There was a good chance of finding diamonds there, but I've been so busy all my life that never had a chance to get back. When I lived in Dobie, I used to see this Hulbert Lee work for the Geological Society of Canada there, and he would be going around in these gravel pits alongside of the highway all the time. And I was always curious. I was working at the college then, not working in the mining industry. One day I stopped and I asked him, I said, "What are you looking for?" He said, "I'm looking for kimberlite float." And I said, "Well, did you ever find any?" And he said, "Yeah, I have found some." So the diamonds must come from somewhere north of here. And that's
Hmm.
where they found the pipes, about 15 miles north of where he was finding the float in the gravel pits.
Wow, eh? That's really interesting because, like I just said there about that part about Randall Carlson. He's a professor and deals with this part about he's looking at flows that went through Canada down through the states, and you're going, there might be more minerals up in Canada, and just if you because now that we have satellite technology with Google Maps, where you can look down and you can see how the landscape was sort of constructed,
Yeah.
and it's really interesting. And it says, well, it could be part of it or whatever, but
Well,
we
you
didn't.
can follow, you can follow the
Yeah,
eskers and the moraines.
yeah.
And like you said, you can see all that on the satellite photographs. And that gives you a pretty good idea the direction that like where I'm working right now, where I stake the 1,000 claims at Geraldton,
Yeah.
there's you can tell in the rocks there where the glacier went over the rocks the direction of travel because of the
Hmm.
striations. And
Yeah.
there's places down there that that one of the government geologists told me about. In
Yeah.
fact, he actually published his results, but nobody
Yeah.
seemed too interested. There was places where there was all sorts of gold grains, and where you find these gold grains, they
Right.
obviously the source must be up ice. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm working on right now is
Oh,
finding where the source of these gold grains that the government geologist, fellow by the name of Rob Kandari,
yeah.
he wrote that in a report that there was 2 other geologists earlier
Yeah.
than him that had found these gold grains, and they did a big survey around the whole Geraldton area. So same
Yeah.
idea with the diamonds.
Hmm.
Uh, so just carrying on there,
Yeah. Go ahead.
my trip to Africa was in 1993, 94 when I worked over in West Guinea. But in 1998, I was back trying to stake some of those diamond claims in Fort Alicorn, like I said, where the iron deposits are. Went
Yeah.
up against IPSCO, and the Regina police arrested me and threw me in jail. So that's another hour-long story that we can tell. But
Okay.
anyways, let's start with a company
Let's do.
from Thunder Bay here,
Yeah.
Y
Okay.
Resources, and they got involved with an ex-CIA agent that had worked in the Belgian Congo for the CIA, and he had come back with 5 diamonds. One was 22 carats, and the other diamonds were smaller. And he got involved with a fellow out of Dallas, Texas, and they got president of Y Resources, Jim Mislicki, interested in these diamonds. And they hatched up a plan, not a plot, but a plan
Yeah.
that they could go over to the Belgian Congo and trade T-shirts and running shoes and all these goods for diamonds with the artisanal miners that were mining in the river.
Yeah.
So some people that I worked with, they said, you know what, the world's going crazy since Chuck Fipley found a Caddy mine up in the territories there. People were looking anywhere to try and get diamond properties. There was a huge staking rush, which my guys didn't get in on. So they said, what about this report that you translated from French into English that talks about an area in Guinea that has diamonds and rubies? And I said, yeah, that's what the report says. There's an area there. Well, why don't you get your butt over to
Is
Guinea?
that me or you? It might
That's
be me.
Oh, Audrey will get it.
Okay.
Audrey will get she's upstairs. And so they got me to go down to Washington and New York and meet with a bunch of groups of people from Ghana and from Guinea. And finally, we decided that Guinea was our best bet. And that's when, I flew over to Guinea to contact the M&R over there. They're actually the same as we have an M&R here. They have an M&R there.
Yeah.
And that was quite an interesting experience because when I was in New York, there was a group of people from Africa, and they were telling me a story. And I said, is this story really real? And they said, well, it's so real. Don't repeat it. When you get over to Africa, do not tell this story to anybody because it could be worth your life. And I'm like, what? Wow. Right off the bat, I'm getting into
Here
some
we
intrigue
go.
here. So I fly back to Thunder Bay and I make all the arrangements for my trip. I met with the Minister of Mines, Nafali Senghare. He had been the Minister of Mines and he had lots of connections over there. And of course, in Guinea, they only speak French. So I speak a little bit of French. So I get all set to head off to Guinea via New York and Dakar, Northern Africa.
Yeah.
And when I arrive in New York, lo and behold, the All-Star game is on. So I get tickets at Madison Square Gardens for the All-Star game. And I go and watch the game, take a bunch of pictures, talk to a bunch of the hockey players after the game. So I've got a 2-for-1 going here.
Yeah.
Then I come out of Madison Square Gardens. It's pitch black, pitch dark. And I jump in a cab and the guy says, where do you want to go? I said, I'm staying at the the Marriott out by JFK Airport.
Yeah.
Okay. We start driving through New York and he's on talking to the dispatch there. And the guy at dispatch, apparently he didn't even know, where I wanted to go. And the taxi driver finally got mad. He said, are you sure you want to go out by JFK there somewhere to the hotel? And I said, yeah, that's where my hotel is. He said, well, we can't find it. We don't know where it is. And he pulled over to the curb, middle of nowhere in New York City, pitch black. He said, get out. I said, what? I'm getting out. I need you to drive me over there.
Yeah.
He said, no, you're out of here. Get out of the cab. So I wasn't very happy. And as soon as I got out, there was two guys walking down the sidewalk towards me. So I took my keys and I got them in my knuckles here. And I got ready for a skirmish. As it turned out, when the guys come up to me, they barely paid any attention to me.
Yeah.
Bam, they're gone. So I get to the airport the next morning and I'm watching.
Did you find the hotel though? Was the hotel existent?
Yeah, I'm trying to think how I found the hotel eventually. I sort of have a blank about that. I obviously walked somewhere, got in another cab, and they took me out to the hotel. So when I'm at the airport the next morning, I'm checking in with my suitcase. I got a normal size suitcase. I see people, these are black people, and they're flying back home to Guinea, and they've got suitcases the size of what we call a trunk.
Yeah.
And they bought all these T-shirts and running shoes, and they're stuffing them into these trunks. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, well, it's got to be for resale because nobody has a family of 150 kids. So I asked them, and they said, yeah, we get back to our native country there, and these things are in demand. Running shoes, T-shirts,
Yeah.
all these different electronic.
Filipinos do that right here in Thunder Bay all the time. Yeah,
Okay,
they send
so
like
I'm thinking that
75%
maybe
of all their stuff. Yeah.
with Y Resources in Mislicky, we're onto something there. And I get on the plane. I fly over to Dakar. I get off the plane in Dakar for a stopover, and I see this beautiful woman there. And my French isn't super good, and I was
Mhm.
by this time I had a traveling partner, a buddy, and we were together in the airport in Dakar, but he was going a different direction. I was flying down to Conakry, and I said, that woman is so beautiful and statuesque. I've got to go over there and tell her how gorgeous she is. And he said, are you nuts? I said, what? He said, well, your French isn't that great, and she may take it the wrong way. And in fact, she's got a 15-year-old son with her, and he probably is packing a dagger. And if they take it the wrong way, he's liable to just out and stab you right in the chest. So I packed that idea in. I get on the plane with 300 other people. I'm the only white guy on the plane. We fly for about 4 or 5 hours. We finally come to Conakry. We get off the plane, and there's a colonel there, colonel in the army. He meets me and he says, I'm Nafali's brother. So we get into the airport terminal there, and
Yeah.
he says, don't worry about security because we're just going to bypass security, which I'm like, whoa, well, interesting. So we bypass security. We get into a big armored truck, a couple soldiers that the colonel's got with him. It's pitch black. And I'm like, how come everything's so black here, like dull? There's no electricity in the capital city of Guinea in Conakry.
Yeah.
So we're wending our way on this road into where my hotel was, right in the city. And I can see these little campfires and little burning pots going there, and people are cooking outside. And I'm pretty awestruck. I get to my hotel. I get into the hotel. It's all a great big fence all around the hotel, and it's right on the ocean. And about
Yeah.
50 feet from the gate into the hotel are the
Yeah.
slums. I'm like, wow. So I get in there. I get a good night's sleep. I get up in the morning, and I go outside, and they're telling me, you got to be careful. You better not go too far from the hotel. I'm careful
Hmm.
of what? Well, there's problems out there. So I wander out about 50 feet, and there's kids playing a little tiny foosball machine, and it's been repaired with duct tape and whatever. And there was one kid there, and he could talk really good English. So I said, well, I'm going to make you my guide. So I hired him, and for some of the days I was there, he would travel with me and act as
Yeah.
sort of my interpreter. But that was quite an interesting situation. So Nafali had lined up some meetings with the MNR,
Yeah.
and we went down there the next day in a chauffeur-driven limousine that he had.
Okay. Okay. For 1 second there. So, how did
Yeah.
you find from leaving North America or Canada, whatever, going over there, that you found the change in how uh, the country was run? Did you find, like, because when I went to Cuba, everybody who told me says Cuba was the worst place in the world, and I went to Cuba in 1988, and it was the best place ever. And I was like, but the people that lived there, yeah, well, they were sort of uh, restricted in what they could do. But for me, it was great. It was like, because I was Canadian in Cuba. But how did you find it, like, as perspective there? Like,
Well, the first thing right off the bat that I can tell you about was, I walked around in the slum there a little bit and tried to take some pictures of people. And anytime I would try to take a picture, like there was
yeah,
a woman breastfeeding her baby, and I was going to take a picture of that, and
yeah,
right away she said, "No, no,
yeah,
uh, d'argent." I won money for if you're going to take my picture.
Well, yeah, okay, yeah. I got the
And
same thing. Yeah,
I noticed that nobody, they lived in these slum tent cities, and
yeah.
I didn't see any latrines around. So I asked the people at the hotel, and they
Hmm.
said, "Oh, they just go down to the beach and do their business, and then the ocean comes in and washes everything away." I'm like, "Oh yeah,
Yeah,
too
yeah,
much." I mean, that's a little different than North America. Plus,
yeah.
there was soldiers everywhere. Uh, that
Hmm.
country was run. It still is run by, as far as I know, by a dictator.
Right.
And
Yeah.
we went to see the M&R the first morning, and they told me, they said, "Show us on a map where you want to have a diamond concession." And I said, "Well, I'm interested in that area in the east where there's diamonds and supposed to be rubies." Well, they'd never
Right.
heard of that, about rubies. I said, "Well, I translated this report, blah, blah, blah." So they said, "Well, show us on a map and write us out a check for $25,000, and we'll give you an area there called a concession."
Right.
So I
Yeah.
said,
Okay.
"Okay, that's my fee, 25,000." They said, "Yep." So that night I phoned back to North America and talked to my people, and I
Yeah.
said, "If you want a concession over there, right off the top, M&R wants 25,000 for the concession." So they said, "Well, you better delve into this a little deeper and check things out." So the next day we were driving around the city for another meeting, and
Hmm.
Naftali says, "Well, we got to go to the bank and get a bunch of these little banknotes." I said, "What's that for?" And he says, "Well, you'll find out." So we drove to the bank, and I had a bunch of American money, and I changed it into hundreds of these little banknotes. They were worth about 25 cents. We get
Yeah.
back in the limo, and when we get in a certain part of the city, we get swarmed by about 80 people, mostly kids, but there was adults there too. And
Yeah.
they swarm right in front of the vehicle, and you can't, the only way to go by is you got to drive over them. So
Yeah.
the chauffeur tells me in French, "Roll down your window and stick some banknotes out there." So I stuck my hand out with the banknotes, and the whole crowd ran around to the side and started
Yeah.
grabbing my banknotes.
Yeah.
I didn't give them all out to them. And then
Yeah.
as soon as they got over on the side grabbing the banknotes, then we shot ahead through the intersection. So that again was another big culture shock.
Well,
And
I'm just gonna stop you just there. Is that's the part that people don't understand about culture shock and things that happen in other countries,
third
and
world countries.
yeah, and it's very surprising. Well, I mentioned Cuba, but there's other countries I went to there too. And like when you go to like tourist resorts, says, "Oh, Mexico's beautiful." Yeah, well, get out of the side of the hotel district and go and see them that are living down there.
Yeah.
They're not. It's not what you think it is, and it's really surprising. And it's the same thing that happens in Canada and North America. Like you look at how it is, but third world countries are even worse. They glorify this small little area where Oprah Winfrey goes and puts a school in and gives
Yeah.
all these people, but the other 800 miles around that to have to walk 8 hours to go in is it's not the same thing, right? I just find that really interesting, and I guess you experienced it before all the internet happened, anyways.
Yeah, this was back in the 90s, about 93, 94, when I worked over in Africa. So,
Yeah.
anyways, I had my little guide there, and he was always at the foosball machine in the morning. So I come
Mm-hmm.
out one day and I said, "We got to go for a meeting with the Canadian ambassador. I got to tell him I'm in the country and talk to him." "Okay,
Yeah.
well, I know where to go." And I didn't have the limousine that day. So he and I decided we'd walk. It was about a mile from my hotel. So we leave there and we start walking. And of course, all along the ocean, there's all these villas that the French had built. And then when the French exited the country, the African people took over these villas. And each
Yeah.
villa has its own diesel generator. So
Yeah.
we're walking along, and we're in sort of a laneway for a street. And of course, all these diesel generators are putting the fumes out in the laneway. And
Right.
then all at once we come out in a cul-de-sac, and there's a tank sitting there and about a dozen soldiers on top of the tank, and they've all got their rifles. So
Wow.
we look over towards the ocean direction, and they start yelling at us. And the kid says, "Just keep walking.
Yeah,
Don't stop.
exactly. Yeah,
Don't go over there."
yeah.
So we just keep boogieing down this lane, and I keep wondering if their soldiers are going to come after us. But as it turns out, they didn't. So we got
Hmm.
to the ambassador's compound. Everything's in compounds, and the kid had to wait outside the compound, and I got ushered in to see the ambassador, and he said, what are you doing over here, Jim? And I said, well, I need to get over to the east part of the country and check out this. I'm going to have to hire some people, and we want to dig around and get some samples and look for these diamonds with the rubies.
Yeah.
And he says, I don't understand why you'd want to work in this country. And I said, well, I mean, I was sent over here by people with money. It's their idea. I'm just, a
Yeah.
working man geologist. So he said, well, you may well find out. And I told him, I said, I was walking around yesterday in this slum area, not by the hotel, but this was a different area. And
Yeah.
he said, what? And I said, yeah, I mean, I want to take a few pictures and get a feel for the culture. And he said, oh my God. He said, you better be careful. He said, there's gangs that run in these slums. And he
Hmm.
said, there'll be 4 or 5 adults together. Well, they're young, more young, not older people.
Yeah.
And he said, there's one runs by you and hits you in the back of the head with a brick and stuns you. And when you fall down, there's a couple others grab you right away and feel around and get your wallet and any money or whatever. And then they
Hmm.
run off in a different direction before the police can get there. I
Yeah.
said, are you serious? He said, yeah, it happens every
Hmm.
day. Tourists
Yeah.
walking around, people walking around that have no business in those places. So
Exactly.
I'm like,
That's the best.
okay.
That's the best line that you ever said. There is that people that don't research where you're going,
Yeah.
and what tourists, and I've watched so many documentaries on this. I've watched so many news articles on this because I research so much stuff. And if you're that inept to not look at where you're going to and say, hey, well, I'm a Canadian, I'm a North American, I'm a European, I'm just going to walk into this third world country. And because I watched the videos on this part, and
Yeah,
yeah, they need food. No, they are set up to go and take you down.
that's
Yeah.
right.
And like, if you're not aware, it says they will rob. Like I said, like when I was in Cuba, there, this guy that came from Russia, he goes and meets these 2 girls that were singing in the backup band in there. They came back to his hotel, they drugged him, they stole his money, and they set the room on fire. And we had
Well,
yeah.
I was luckier than that.
Yeah.
I never had anybody set my room on fire. But anyways,
Yeah.
the next day, and the ambassador gave me a ride back to the hotel, and the
Yeah.
kid was still waiting outside. And I said,
Mhm.
let the kid ride with us because, he lives somewhere around the hotel there. He said, absolutely not. He's not getting in this limo because he
Right.
had a chauffeur driven limo. So I'm starting
Mm.
to wake up that this is a different world over there.
Yeah.
I hired some people with some jeeps to go out to a property and
Yeah.
get a feel for the country where they were actually mining
Mhm.
some diamonds.
Yeah.
Apparently, no rubies there. And when we were there, here comes the army. I'm like, oh, army machine guns. And
Yeah.
they asked the people that were doing the work. This had nothing to do with me. I was just trying to get a handle on things. They said,
Yeah.
let's see your permit. And so they had the permit from the M&R there, and they showed it to them. Oh,
Yeah.
well, this permit's no good. And they had some people from another company from
Yeah.
Colorado with them. The Army guys did. And they said, this permit's no good. This isn't signed by the dictator. You need a permit signed by the dictator. And they said,
Mhm.
pack up all your equipment and your guys that are down in the pit there panning for diamonds and
Yeah.
get the hell out of here, because these
Yeah.
people are taking over. They have a permit, and I'm like, well, how much did they pay? Well,
Yeah.
apparently they paid $50,000 and the dictator signed the permit. So
Right.
now we're starting to see what happens.
Well, that's the whole corruption of it, right? So you do all the work to find out where there could be something, and then somebody makes up a paper and says, "Well, they paid $50,000. This is theirs, and they have the rights before you." It was like almost like this whole thing that just happened there with that Donald Trump Mar-a-Lago thing.
Oh
Says, "Oh,
yeah,
okay," he says, "Oh yeah, well, just FBI just going to raid, and can we see the warrant? Uh, yeah, well, you can see it in a week
yeah,
when we figure out, right? That's the same thing that happens in third world countries. Everything is all corruption,
yeah. We went
right?
to another meeting the next day.
Yeah,
Nefali was with me, and we had a couple other people along with us. And at the meeting, we ended up breaking for lunch. And there was a fella came up to me and he said, "You're from Canada, right?" And like he was talking in French, and I said, "Yes, I am."
yeah,
And he said, "I'd like you to do me a favor." I said, "What's that?" And he said, "I'm going to pass you a letter." I said, "What? You're going to pass me a letter?" He said, "Yeah, I want you to, when you get back to Canada, to mail this to my wife." And
jeez.
he said, "To tell her that I'm okay." And I said, "What the hell are you talking about, buddy? Are
Was
you a
this was it
Canadian citizen?" He said, "Yeah,
was
I'm
it
from Montreal." But he said,
what's his wife Shania Twain? That would have made a good. No, I
oh,
know. Sorry, I'm sorry. It just
anyways, when nobody was looking, he passes me this letter. I wasn't very happy about getting this
yeah,
letter in case somebody ended up searching me. And he said that he was in a lawsuit with the Guinea government, and he couldn't. He was under house arrest. He couldn't leave the country. And I
yeah,
said, "Well, you're at this meeting." He says, "Yeah, but I can't make phone calls. I can't get on a plane. I'm so now I'm really starting to wake up." And after I saw what happened out in the jungle there with the company that didn't have the right permit, so
yeah,
we have a meeting lined up with these expat geologists that supposedly know more about the rubies and the diamonds. So we decide to go and see them. So I'm sitting downstairs. Nefali goes upstairs to have a meeting with, like, line up this meeting at some
mhm.
hotel with them. And I'm sitting there, and I got people going by me, and they look at me and they say, "Maudit anglais." I'm like, "Oh yeah, well that means goddamn Englishman in English."
Oh,
Like
okay.
you can tell that there's certain people have a hatred for white people, for English people.
Well, just
So
look
I'm
what
like,
look what Britain did there, the Queen there, and her expeditions throughout the whole world, right? So
yeah,
yeah,
that's
so
right. So the next day we have a meeting with these Russian geologists. Well, this was the shit show of all time
yeah,
because I was paying the bill, and these guys were sort of holding me over the barrel about what they knew about the diamonds in the rubies area because they had worked in the country for years. The Russians had been in there and raped the country, took all sorts of diamonds that they
right,
had found back to Russia. And later on in a documentary, I saw these storehouses that were full of diamonds in Russia, and they talked about some of those diamonds had come from Guinea. So these
right.
guys, they were chugging the vodka shots down as fast as they could,
Hmm.
chain smoking, and telling the waitress, "Bring me another package of cigarettes, all on my tab." I'm like, "Oh my God." I'm not.
Oh God,
So a couple of days later, Nefali said, uh,
is
he said,
is Mick Jagger showing up here soon there? Because he's on his tab there. Rolling Stones better show up here pretty soon. This guy's paying for it all.
yeah, exactly. So the next day or the next night, Nefali comes with this fella that's got an actual 52 carat, 55 carat diamond. And he's telling me that, the diamond is for sale. Are my people interested? So they come up to my hotel room, and the guy that had the diamond, he's obviously a diamond merchant. he had a bodyguard with him, and this guy was like 6'8". I don't know. I didn't see any other 6'8" people around, but in my travels, but this guy was, and he had a big robe on, and every time he turned his body a certain way, you could see this bulge on his stomach, which I'm
Yep.
pretty sure was probably he's probably packing something in there, probably a
Yeah.
handgun. So they show me the diamond at 55 carats, and I'm looking at it with my loupe. And of course,
Yeah.
all diamonds have different internal characteristics, which
Right. Yeah.
determine how you're going to cut it. And I
Yeah.
could see some bubbles, I could see some fractures. And I said, well, okay, how much? Because my people back in Canada were interested in me coming back with some diamonds.
Yeah.
And he said, well, we want 1,000 US, or the diamond merchant said, I want 1,000 US per carat. So that's 55,000. He says, you can pay me right now. And I said, well, I don't have 55,000 US on me. I
So
can get it.
say how big would a 55 carat be? Like the size of like a toonie? Like
There's
round?
marbles, and then
Yeah.
boulders.
Yeah.
It was about this thing was, and it had a yellowish tinge, and it was like a small boulder, bigger than a marble, but not as big as a boulder. And
Yeah.
and of course, it had some shape to it,
Yeah.
and it was like I said, it was part canary in terms of it had a yellowish tinge to it. And
And
I
now
said, well,
that
I'll take some pictures and I'll send them back to my guys, and if they're interested in buying that diamond. He
yeah.
said, well, if you take it to New York and cut it, I mean, you'll get a lot more money for it.
Right.
Well, I'd already had an experience in New York where with the Y diamonds,
Hmm.
uh, you know, they were supposed to be cut and then put up for auction. And what I found out was you do not leave the diamonds with anybody for a second. When you take them in to get cut, you sit there with the guy that's cutting them, and at night, if he hasn't finished cutting them, you put them back in your briefcase and you go back to the hotel and you come back the next morning. You never take your eyes off those diamonds,
Right.
because my understanding was why had why resources had apparently paid the CIA people $150,000, and when the diamonds finally were cut and went to auction, they got 40 grand for them.
Yes, this comes back into the Dell conspiracy of the delicious recipe, because I've talked about this about 2 years ago, and about how misleading business practices is not yours, but the thing is though is that when you go into places and you leave things around and things get switched over, and it's like you even know it says yes, it says here's a beer, and then you're given a piece with something like some sort of you wonder why the girl got raped afterwards, or why you have a beer that has just water in it that just tastes like beer. And it's really I I, I just I just want people to wake up that says there is very evil people out there that do evil things, and you can't expect that North American ideals exist in third world countries.
Yeah. Well, anyways, the bottom line was I did what I had to do over there. I came back, I wrote my report, and
Yeah.
these people have, after they talk, I mean, I didn't put all my adventures in the report, but I
Yeah.
did put in there that there is an area there. The Russians confirmed there was diamonds and rubies there at the meeting,
Yeah.
but also the part about you have to get the permit right from the dictator, right from the horse's mouth, or you're on shaky ground.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, hey, do you want your driver's license from Pascal, or do you want it from the ministry? Well, I'll take it from Pascal. It's only $15. Well, that doesn't account for anything, right? Says, how do
Yeah,
you get your plates done? Like, yeah. Actually, there's been so interesting. Indiana Jones was the very first movie. Was the whole thing about that with little short round about I go take a round. I tell you get around everything. And it's like, how do you know this stuff? It's a 4-year-old kid, and the part was that kids are brought up because they're street kids to go and rob you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that
that
was
happened. This is my last big adventure.
yeah,
Is when we went to the airport. There was another dictator coming from some other Guinea-Bissau or something, another
yeah,
country, and he was right. He was supposed to ride by us in a Pope mobile, and we
yeah,
tried to get the airport before the parade started, but unfortunately we there was too many people on the highway, and so things were slow.
yeah,
So we got stuck in the traffic, and we're waiting at an intersection there, and there's women in all these beautiful colored dresses, and the guy goes by at about 60 miles an hour, I guess, so nobody could get a bead on him. And he's
yeah.
riding in this plexiglass Pope mobile, and he goes shooting by us. And then we have to wait for the traffic all to dissipate. Finally, we get to the airport, and we're 3 hours late for my flight. But
Oh,
the good
geez.
news was there was a lot of other people that were on that same flight that were stuck in traffic as well. So when we
Yeah,
get to the airport, we pull
yeah.
up the back door on the station wagon, and before I could blink, there was four little kids jumped in there and grabbed my luggage and started running away with it. And
No way.
I'm like, what? And I'm tempted to run after them, but Nafali tells me, he said, "Don't worry, your luggage will be in the airport at the." So we walk down there, and sure enough, there's the kids, and they're only allowed to go so far. And when I would walk by them with my
Hmm.
luggage, they all had their hands through the railings there, and asking me for money in French. And of course, had run out of these little notes that
Tokens.
I had, and
Yeah,
all I had left was 950 US dollar bills, and I
yeah,
had that in my luggage, and it was hidden away. So we get up to security there. Well, I was really upset that I couldn't give those kids something because they
yeah,
carried my luggage down for me. And
yeah,
we get up to security there, and there's a big lineup of people. I was fortunate because I got in the front of the line, but there was more people coming in behind me, and the guard, he had an Uzi slung around his neck, and he started going through my briefcase, and I had a special compartment there where my
wow.
945 $950 bills were, and he found
Yeah,
them. He found them, and then he looked at me, and I looked at him, and he goes,
yeah. Why did you
and
give this to the?
obviously he wants me to give him some money.
Yeah,
But at that point, I was so pissed off about everything that I refused to give him any money. And people are behind me, and they're screaming, "Allons, allons, let's go! We're going to miss our flight. We're already
yeah.
3 hours late." And
Just
so
give them away your money, white boy.
we're at a stalemate, and
Yeah,
and I'm thinking what flashed through my head at that specific time was, uh, maybe I should just pound this guy right in the head, knock him
yeah,
down, and grab my briefcase and run for the door, because the door was
yeah,
only about 30 feet away to get on the plane.
yeah.
And I had that brief thought go through my head, and all at once I had this funny feeling, and I turned around, and there was his partner, and he was about 20 feet behind me, and he had his Uzi already up, pointed right at me. So guess what? If I'd have slugged that guy and tried to run for it, they'd have found my body rotting in the jungle somewhere, I'm sure.
Well, I
And
think if well, you played hockey. You give a hip check and you roll down. So you it probably would have been good.
so, anyways, that was my last big adventure. I got on the plane, and I think that flight actually we flew straight back to New York City. And so I filed my report, and these people said, "Sounds pretty. I don't know that we want to work over there. We could spend our money in other places." So,
Well, I think there's been a lot of shows about that, about people doing gold mining in third world countries and stuff like that, and it doesn't work out that it's very well sought out, that it's productive, unless you're a very big company that is in bed with the government,
yeah,
that or the military that's in that
yeah.
country,
Well, I
and
know
that's
a geologist that had a company, quite a famous person, actually. I won't mention his name right now, but anyways, they put up the money to open a mine in Russia, and they
Yeah.
went over for the first gold pour. And when they
Yeah.
got there, of course, there were soldiers standing around and all the Russian people.
Yeah.
And I think it was Kazakhstan actually, and they told him, they said, "Here's the deal. We
Yeah.
need all the gold bars from this pour. You'll
Yeah.
get all the gold bars from the next pour." And
Yeah.
they said, "Well, it's supposed to be a 50-50 arrangement." And they
Yeah.
said, "No, we're having social problems and we need the money." So
Yeah.
they took all the gold bars from that pour
Yeah.
and cashed them in. And so he was supposed to get, so he goes back over there to get the next shipment of gold, and
Yeah.
same thing. So he said, "You know what? I'm out of here." And he pulled his money and everything out. But in the meantime,
Okay. Well, I got like 10 seconds left there. So tell them your book there, and tell them where they can find you, Big Jim, because I'll have you back on again for more stories.
yeah, well, I'm pretty well sold out of the book about my grandfather's gold mine, the Naracme gold mine story. I got a couple left.
Oh,
And the other one,
that's
Head Frames, Happiness and Heartache. It's got the
Yeah.
picture of that bull moose jumping over the deadfall. And
Mhm.
nobody else has a picture of a bull moose jumping over deadfall. But
Mm.
anyways, if they know how to get hold of you, then they know how to get hold of me.
That sounds awesome. I really appreciate you being back, and I'm really sorry about the last time there. Just I came back from camp, and that was
Yeah,
something
no,
else.
it's not a problem. We got it done. And
Yeah.
anyways, I had a great adventure and an interesting trip. And the main thing was I came back alive.
There you go. And the thing is, though, is that Big Jim has more stories, and I have more stories there too as well. And he's told me so many stories. We've only touched on some of them there, anyway. So yeah, the Winnipeg Bombers and
Flin Flon Bombers.
Flin Flon Bombers. Yes.
Yeah, signed me up, and I hadn't skated they were so desperate for players. I hadn't skated for 6 years, but
the home of Bobby Hall, right?
Bobby Clark.
Bobby Clark. That's what it is. Anyways,
Jerry
I gotta
Hart.
go and click off, or else I'm gonna get donced for this.
Talk later,
So, thank you very much. This was the Delicious Recipe Thursday night. Check us out next week. New guests, new times.